Welcome back to Learn Astrology with Mary. My name's Mary English. You can find me at www.maryenglish.com, maryenglish.co.uk and UK Astrologer. Hello, how are you? Somebody said to me the other day, it's a very old friend, he said, do you ever take a breath? I can never hear you breathing, because I am quite capable of going yakety yakety yak for quite a few sentences. And I actually find it quite annoying when people edit their YouTube videos or edit their podcasts even, so you don't ever hear the intake of a breath. It just doesn't. I was watching a video the other day and the person was going yakety 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 yakety, and then edited it and yakety 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 yakety, and then I thought, nobody actually talks like that. That isn't natural speech. So I hope you realise that what you're listening to today on my podcast is natural speech. Now, sometimes I do have to edit things because occasionally I bang something, like I did just then. I banged the microphone. Or I'll pause and think for too long, which is dreadful to listen to. So I will edit those things out. But the majority of the time, you're actually hearing a real person really speaking. Anyway, enough of that. Now, this week, I want to tell you about two bits of news. So bit of news number one is the podcast has now been downloaded 500,000 times. So of all the episodes, and we're now today episode 378, there are now 500,000 downloads to the podcast. So it's a celebration. Yay! I'm gonna have a cup of tea in a minute, celebrate. And thing number two is I read a most interesting article on the Good News Network that I'd like to share with you. And this will refer back to two previous episodes, which is, I was just checking how long ago it was I discussed this, but it was a hell of a long time ago. Now, the headline of the article that I read was 1,000-year-old scientific instrument was passed between Muslims and Jews, historic neighbours, for centuries. And this was on the Good News Network, which I do follow because there's too much news that isn't good. Eek. And I'll read it to you, okay? So, scientists say an 11th century Islamic astrolabe bearing both Arabic and Hebrew inscriptions is one of the oldest examples ever discovered, and one of only a handful known in the world. They say the astronomical instrument was adapted, translated and corrected for centuries by Muslim, Jewish and Christian users in Spain, North Africa and Italy, where it was discovered. Dr. Federica Gigante of Cambridge University first came across a newly uploaded image of the astrolabe by chance on the website of the Fadonzi Museo Michelacci Erazzo in Verona. Intrigued, she asked them about it. The museum didn't know what it was and thought it might actually be fake, she told the press, but it's now the single most important object in their collection. When I visited the museum and studied the astrolabe up close, I noticed that not only was it covered in beautifully engraved Arabic inscriptions, but I could see faint inscriptions in Hebrew, she said. And I thought I must be dreaming, but I kept seeing more and more. It was very exciting. Now I'm going to stop reading that there, and I'm going to put the links to it. So what the heck is an astrolabe? Now you need to go back to, I've done it twice, so it's episode, oh my god, where did I put it now? So it's episode 98, where I'd seen an exhibition. I'd gone to the British Museum to look at some astrolabes there. Don't worry, I'll tell you what an astrolabe is in a minute. So episode 98, you'll have to spell it 98 to discover it on the podcast. And then I covered another episode of it when I bought a copy of one, and that's episode 120. Now, astrolabes were invented a hell of a long time ago, 225 BCE approximately. So They were used by, they didn't have things called astronomers then. They were all called astrologers because they studied the stars and the planets. And they were invented so that they could locate where particular stars were in the sky and also where the planets were, because they knew that the planets existed. And an astrolabe, I've got an app on my phone. Actually, I ought to put the link to the app because I haven't done that previously, but I've got an app on my phone, wherever my phone is in the kitchen. I've got the astrolabes were used to by astrologers to be able to construct a birth chart, okay? Because to have a birth chart, as you know, you need to know the ascendant. Otherwise, you can't start making a chart. So we're talking a long time ago, and they're fabulous, fabulous things. And I just wanted to reiterate today how marvellous they are, and to just tell you a little bit more about my thoughts about them and why they're so flipping useful. But now, when people describe them today, they talk about them as if they were a manual version of a calculator. They were more than that. They were beautiful. They were absolutely beautiful. And I've seen the ones in the British Museum, and I've now promised myself I'm going to go to the it's not a museum, I think it's a library in Oxford, and they've got some pretty old ones there. The Oxford location is called the History of Science Museum, and they've got so many there that they've catalogued them. So I'll put a link to one of them, which is absolutely beautiful. It's made by a person called Abd al-Karim al-Mashri, and it was probably made in Cairo, and it's made of brass. And it was acquired by somebody called Lewis Evans in 1924, and it was probably made in 625. It depends what calendar you're using as well, but trust me, it's an old one. It goes back a long way. But it's lovely because on them you can actually see the signs of the zodiac, and it's beautiful because we sort of think that astrology is reasonably modern and, nobody knows anything about it and but people know lots of things about it, and it's awful how certain parts of astrology have been completely forgotten. And the dividing of the universe above our heads into the signs of the zodiac still happens today. And we need to recognise that the ancient mariners, etc., people that were on boats, their only way to navigate from here to there would be to use the stars, because the stars don't move that much, certainly not in a trip that you're going to take on a boat. And things like the sun rising and the sun setting, all of these things that you can discover from an astrolabe. But astrologers use them as well. So when you read these old texts, or people sort of quote to you from old texts, and somebody sort of, because I'm going on about this now because I'm doing this thing with Culpeper, but tell you more about that. But when they took, old text that gets translated by various different people here and there, and they talk about, they know the ascendant. Well, how did they calculate the flipping ascendant? Because they used an astrolabe, because some clever little bod knocking about back then had created one of these things. Now, obviously, you'd have to be reasonably well off to even to be able to afford one, for goodness sakes. I'm sure they weren't cheap even. Trust me, they're not cheap now. I mean, my little wooden one that I've got, I think it cost me just under £60. And the man that makes them was retired back then, so this is a while ago. I expect he's in heaven now. Doesn't make them anymore because I got it on Etsy. There are a few people on Etsy that do create them, but the other thing you have to remember with an astrolabe, they're set for a certain location. So this one that turned up in the news here, so on the Good News Network website, which it only has good news on, that one was created in one particular location. So if it got moved or sold or traded, it wouldn't work in another location that hasn't got the same, I don't know if it's longitude or latitude, the bit that goes up and down, because you wouldn't be able to calculate correctly with it. So if you were living somewhere out where astrology all happened, in the West Bank or whatever you want to call it, Nile area, etc., you'd you'd have your astrolabe for that particular area. But if you were an astrologer that was in Italy or something, because by then astrology worked its way across the oceans, you'd have to have an astrolabe that was created for the location you're in. Now, the one I've got is the coordinates for it are set to London, and I'm not a million miles away from London. I'm only 100 miles, so it's just a bubble. And anyway, I was born in London, so I can calculate my ascendant and my moon sign, etc., on there using it without getting a headache, because it's set for the place that I was born. So the other thing to remember is that when we're talking about astrolabes, it's all very well saying, oh, anybody could use them to do this and that, but they were location based. You couldn't use someone else's astrolabe that came from a different continent to you. So this one that ended up in the news is a beauty. Actually, as astrolabes go, it is pretty beautiful. It's got some jolly nice twiddly bits on it. So if you had an astrolabe from a different location, you wouldn't be able to calculate with it. You'd probably, I don't know, maybe you'd have to add something onto it to be able to make it work, because astrology is necessitates lots of mathematics and scientific measurements that you can't just do from guessing. So I'm going to put the links to the two articles. So there's one from the Good News Network, there's one from The Guardian's covered it as well, and I'll put the original research for that Dr. Federica Gigante, who's from Cambridge University, and I'll put that is her original research, isn't it? Let me double check. Yes, that's her original research. And the other thing to remember is that when it comes, because it was International Women's Day, I think it was yesterday or the day before, that this whole bit of research was done by a woman, and a hell of a lot of research, and people quote it. It's 99% of it is blokes. I just thought, oh, it's really nice that a woman had done this and had written about it and researched it and da-da-da-da-da. And so not even then, but back in the day as well, they had the Tropic of Capricorn, and they had, the path the sun makes, the celestial Orby thing, and those are all on astrolabes as well. I mean, I only know how to operate mine. If you gave me one from somewhere else, I'd probably be able to calculate the ascendant with. Actually, I can do just about that much with an astrolabe. So it's a very, very short podcast this week. So I just wanted to share with you some good news. The good news that they've discovered another one that was pretty ancient. And what's even nicer about this, this is the point that the Good News Network is making in their article, that it was shared between Muslims and Jews, and then eventually ended up in Verona, which is in Italy, in the Jewish community there, and the different cultures had tried to translate on it into their language. So there's Hebrew scratchings on there. The original one was written in Arabic. So it's the point they're making on the Good News Network is that these are different cultures, but that didn't matter, because they were all talking the same language, which, bringing it all together for you today now anyway, is what astrology is capable of doing, because no one owns astrology. There's no one god of astrology like Christianity or Catholicism or Protestantism or Muslimism or Arabic or whatever. And that's the lovely thing about astrology, is it cuts across cultures and countries and unites us all and helps us understand each other. So that's my little plug for astrology there. So yeah, today I'm celebrating 500,000 downloads, yay, and this lovely astrolabe, and I'll put the links to the Oxford Scientific Museum, and I've promised myself now I'm going to make a trip over there and see if I can actually see these ones in the flesh, because when I saw the ones at the British Museum, as nice as they were behind glass, and the glass, I don't know what you call them, glass, not cages, the glass display exhibity things were quite deep, so you couldn't I wanted to go up and peer into it. I would love to have held one. I would love to have had one in my hands and twiddled it, and then just thought, oh, you know, somebody thousands of years ago was twiddling this and looking up at the sky and stuff. So yeah. Anyway, I hope you have a fab week, and I'll be back next week. And if you would like to share your chart on the podcast, then please ping me an email and send me your data, and send me any questions that you've got about astrology. You know, Mary, what's happening about this? Well, Mary, what does it mean about that? And we'll cover it for you. So have a good week. Bye-bye now.